3 plane loads of South Australians arrived in Sydney yesterday. There'll be more today. They are being temperature tested, but not tested for COVID. Why?
Well, look, Laura, we're all in this together as a nation. They've had about 2 new cases yesterday. The fact that the state's in lockdown, it's not really for me to pass judgment in relation to the policies that they're pursuing in South Australia. But what I would say in our state is that this is not just a health crisis, it's an economic crisis too. We've got to learn to be living with the virus and open up our economy. And we're very happy to keep those borders open. We're moving to open our border with Victoria. At the height of the restrictions here in our state, it was costing us close to $1.5 billion a week. We've been able to get that down, but if we don't, we can't be in a situation as a state where every time there's a new case, we're going into lockdown.
Well, you're, I guess, out on your own with that at some stage. There's a lot of other premiers have shut state borders to South Australia because of this cluster, but we're talking about 22 or 23 cases. You don't seem worried about them at all. Is that because you have faith in the South Australian government or your own?
Our own, and you know, we have invested $3 billion in our health response since the start of this pandemic. We have significantly invested in our tracking and tracing teams. We've quadrupled our ICU capacity. You know, if every time there's going to be a few new cases and states go into lockdown, it's going to make it very, very difficult for our nation's economy going forward. And we don't just follow their health advice. We balance that health advice with economic advice each week when we meet, and we make a decision off the back of that. But you know, if we're just going to look at the health numbers every single day and make decisions there, there'll be substantial impacts on our economy downstream.
Okay, let's look at a few other issues. Crown Casino has been blocked from opening next month. This would have given the city a huge economic boost in terms of jobs and income. Are you counting the cost of that?
Well, we think the hit to revenue will be marginal, and obviously there's concerns there in relation to ILGA's statement with Phil Crawford yesterday. We will obviously monitor the situation. Paddy Bergen brings down her report next year, and we will obviously look at that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Barangaroo is a great site here in Sydney, and it's a beautiful building, and we will continue to develop that Western Harbour precinct.
Are you concerned about Crown Casino and their history and their ability to stop money laundering?
Well, I think it's pretty clear there's some concerning elements that have come through this inquiry. The fact that ILGA's come out yesterday and said they shouldn't be able to use their gaming facilities until such time as a report's handed down is obviously a cause for concern for the state. But I don't want to preempt what the results of the inquiry are, and the government will wait till next year and we'll respond accordingly.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll bury your head in that inquiry when it does get handed down. But in the meantime, you've been buried in the budget as well, I know, this week. So let me ask you, why have you pursued privatisation when money is so cheap?
Well, as they say in the old El Paso ad, why not both? We have had our asset recycling approach here in our state put New South Wales in a very strong position leading into the pandemic. We had a negative net debt position. That's enabled us to borrow now at record low rates. We're locking in 10-year bonds at around 1.1%. We're extending the weighted average life of those bonds from around 6 years to 8 years. The cost of debt to New South Wales has come down from about 6%, as I said, to about 1%. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't make better use of our balance sheet. And we have said that we will sell down the residual interest in our in the Sydney Motorway Corporation in WestConnex, and those funds that the capital that we unlock from that transaction, we will invest in public transport like Metro West. So it's a combination of both debt financing and asset recycling, and I think that's the approach of the past, and it's put us in a very good position going forward.
Well, it was 20 years ago when John Howard brought in the GST, and part of that promise was to get rid of stamp duty and payroll tax. Now, the first Treasurer in those intervening 20 years that's come close to doing that. You haven't quite done it, but is that the end goal?
Oh, well, I think, as I've said for some time, Laura, all state governments, unfortunately, have a revenue system that's very inefficient, and that's just a product of history. and we want to put as much downward pressure on taxes in our state and have a system that's fairer, but drives economic and productivity growth and jobs growth off the back of that. In this year's budget, if you look in New South Wales, 2 years ago we had a payroll tax threshold here of $750,000. It was pretty average compared to where the other states were. We've now lifted that to $1 million. In this year's budget, we've taken up to $1.2 million. So that's a significant saving for business across our state. We've cut the payroll tax rate for 2 years from 5.45% to 4.85%. That's the lowest headline rate in the nation. So we believe we've got the best and the most competitive payroll tax rates anywhere in the country. And that means that business will save on average around $30,000 a year and hopefully not just invest in their business, but bring on new staff.
I congratulate you for making reforms and making announcements on childcare. This is also a space that the federal government is looking at but not willing to move on. There are now calls from within the coalition at a federal level to perhaps make childcare tax deductible. Is that something you would support?
I would. I think that's a very interesting idea. It's a significant cost and impediment for families right across the state, and that's why earlier on in the pandemic we provided 15 hours free preschool for parents. And what we've done in this budget is extend that to the end of next year. We want to provide as much downward pressure on prices for families. And the other issue with preschools is that we have a federal system in place where the Commonwealth looks after childcare and we're looking after early childhood and preschool. So in terms of area of reform, that's something that should be looked at so we've got more of a consistent system, because whilst we provide this extra support for families here in our state, it doesn't extend to the childcare system, which is run by the Commonwealth Government.